What is our first main topic today?
First one up is from Lawrence Coffey. I know the Russos did things before they started directing Marvel movies, but I just have a hard time imagining them doing anything other than MCU films. Anyway, did you see the story about how the Russos just partnered up with MGM to oversee, produce, and even direct some of the remakes from MGM's massive library of films? Does this sort of end the relationship between the Russo brothers and Disney at this point? Is this a good move for them right now? What do you think?
All right, so for those of you who aren't really sure what he's talking about, a news story came out that kind of revealed about what's going on with the future of the Russo brothers. We already know that they were going to be working on a movie with Tom. I almost said Tom Hiddleston. Tom, who's Spider-Man? Tom Holland. It's a Tom H. I had the right letters. Tom H. They're doing that, but now we also know one of the big next major projects is they're going to be working with MGM specifically to do reboots of their existing library and IP, and they've already got one lined up. Now, here's what it actually said in the news report. This comes from Deadline. It says, MGM has made an inventive deal with Agbo Films partners Joe and Anthony Russo, that's the Russo brothers company, that will see the Avengers Endgame helmers essentially become the spiritual creative architects of some of the iconic properties in the MGM library. They've made a multi-film, non-exclusive, we'll talk about that in a second, non-exclusive creative partnership to co-develop, co-produce, co-finance a slate of projects. The deal can extend to other projects originated by Agbo, but the driving force behind this is that they will creatively steer the refurbishment of the classic library titles. The first film projects to be produced through the partnership includes a reimagining of the Thomas Crown Affair, which long has had Michael B. Jordan attached to direct. So one of the things that we see here is that this is a non-exclusive deal. That means, which really most of the deals in Hollywood are non-exclusive, but it basically means that the Russo brothers, while they're going to be very busy working on these MGM properties, there's even words that they may direct this Thomas Crown Affair thing. They're going to be co-financing it, so they're going to be partly paying for it, producing it, all this kind of stuff, giving oversight to these projects. And I'm really excited about a Michael B. Jordan-led Thomas Crown Affair, by the way. But the key phrase in there, going to your question, is that it's non-exclusive. If the Russo brothers decide they want to direct, say, another film for, I don't know, the MCU, they can. I don't know how they'd have the time to do that, but they can be involved as producers and things in other things as well. So they can have their hands in other honeypots, if you will, at the same time that all this stuff is going on. I think this sounds really interesting. Rob, is this a good move for the Russo brothers at this point for their evolution as filmmakers? And do you think maybe this marks the end of them doing comic book films right now?
Well, first of all, I've said this also about Kevin Feige and everybody at the MCU. Once you've done Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame, where do you go? Filmmakers are artists. Everybody wants a new challenge. And I am sure that MGM, this is not just a small deal. This is a big deal where MGM is having them. They probably backed up a truckload of money. I don't know whose idea was it, but it's pretty innovative to go into. MGM has an incredibly deep, very exciting library. I mean, I think it's interesting they mentioned the Thomas Crown Affair, which was remade by, of course, John McTiernan, diehard director John McTiernan, with Pierce Brosnan and Rene Russo, and I thought terrifically. And I think this is a huge opportunity for them. And like you said, it's non-exclusive. And who wants to make, after you've made 4 of arguably the greatest comic book films of all time, where do you go after Endgame? It's kind of like, once more with Feeling in Buffy. Where do we go from here? I can sing too. And
grab your guitar.
I think it's a great move for them. It gives them a huge creative playground to move into. They can shepherd new filmmakers. They can do what Kevin Feige did for them. Now they've got literally an entire studio to play with, the studio's back catalog. They can bring out new filmmakers. They can work with Michael B. Jordan, who obviously did such a great job in the MCU and in movies like Creed. I mean, he's an incredibly electrifying new performer and a great screen presence that I've loved since Friday Night Lights. It's all good for them, and I think if they want to come back to the MCU, they can. But I don't know, where do you go after what they've done? I'm like, man, I want to go make a movie like set in the real world. The Thomas Crown Affair is a romp about an art thief. Bring it on. I want to go shoot in Europe and drink champagne at lunch and work French hours. It'll be great. So, yeah, let's get the hell out of the humidity of Atlanta. see the world.
Yeah, I honestly think, well, I don't think this marks the end of them working with Disney, and maybe not even marks the end of them working with Marvel. I think Endgame is going to be the last movie you see the Russo brothers direct for Marvel, because if they're expanding their business and they're expanding their empire this much, they ain't going to have time to take a full, because when you're directing a film, you don't have time for anything else. Like you are working on a single film for probably 3 years, and it is your day in, day out obsession. And if they're going to try to do a whole bunch of different things and be producers of all these things and giving creative direction, all this stuff, I think you're going to see the Russos as producers on other MCU films. I actually don't think we're going to see them directing another one now that their career's taken off. Do you think that's accurate, or do you think that's not true?
I think you could very well be correct. Because look, filmmakers are like anybody else. I mean, sure, we love movies. We want to see more of these kinds of films, but they've made 4. 4. That's a lot. I mean, to think about how long of their lives, if you think about how long a career is directing, you know, we have some directors that work for quite a long time. Alfred Hitchcock made 53 feature films over the course of his lifetime. But a lot of film directors don't have that many options, and you want to build up an oeuvre of work. Stanley Kubrick, my favorite director, worked in many different genres, you know, and he never made I think a move that wasn't well considered, and it took him a long time to make each film. But the Russo brothers have they've got the one thing that you can't get in Hollywood. That is consistent hits, consistent box office. Some of the biggest, there's only one other movie that made more money, or maybe 2 other movies, Titanic and Avatar. But if Endgame, Endgame could take Avatar, you never know. But what do you do after that? I don't think after making Infinity War and Endgame, why go back to superhero movies? I mean, I would think that let's branch out. I want to see the Russo brothers make a romantic comedy, like we talk about in this week's episode of Best Movie, Worst Movie.
Comedy is where they come from. They come from comedy.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.